Want help to grow your business? Download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi, welcome to the latest issue of Think Global India edition. And in this exercise, I'm joined by my friends Mehul and Suren. Welcome, both of you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And today we're going to ask the question, why India? Why, as a small business owner somewhere around the world, would you choose India for the expansion and development of your business? And in particular, we're going to sort of explore India at a macro level. We're going to then drill down into some detail around how you go about that and where you might start. So let's start at a very high level. Mehul, perhaps you could answer the question, why would a small business owner, when they have the whole of Asia to choose from, why would they start with India?
David, it's a good question, but the starting point is that we've got a population of 1.2 billion people in India, and that's all consumers for any business to start with. Secondly, the new Prime Minister Modi, has been saying in his talks that there are three distinctive features which make India the destination for businesses, and that's the 3 Ds. The first being democracy, the second being demography, and the third being demand. So from every Western civilization, they love to be in a country where there's democracy as a starting point. And from a demographic perspective, there is more than about 500 million people who are youth under the age of around 25. And that becomes one of the starting points why businesses want to be there. And the third is sheer demand. The middle class of India is a growing population. They're out there to buy, and that's where the businesses need to be.
Yeah.
Lastly, I'd like to add the fact that India is in trajectory to become the third largest economy in the world by 2020, as I see in statistics. And probably that's the reason why that's the destination.
And we're all obsessed about growth numbers, how GDP growth. India's come quite a long way recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting to see around the world that growth has been stagnated in all parts of the world, but clearly the BRIC countries have been doing well, and India has been the leader in terms of the growth. So clearly that's been the choice for many businesses to be in there.
I should also just mention about the history of India. India has always been a very insular country, and it's always looked at inward growth. Since the Modi government now, they've looked at kind of expanding and opening up India to the world. And that makes a big difference, because you've now got at least a government encouraging people to integrate with other countries and look at a diverse range of businesses. Now, apart from India being fun and exciting and interesting, and sometimes it's not just all about business. It's about how you do business and how you enjoy business. India has a lot to offer in terms of having fun while doing business.
Yes, and actually touching on history, I first started going to India in the late 70s actually, and in those days it was a very poor country, and it was hard to imagine anything important could happen in India, but that's all changed. What's been the catalyst for that change?
Well, I think if you look at the population of non-resident Indians that have gone outside of India and have explored the world, it's in excess of 25 million people that have gone out and integrated with the world, gained information, gained knowledge, and are now bringing this back to India. And that's initiating a whole new way of thinking, a whole new motivation to stimulate growth in India. And given the base India is coming from that poor growth, there's a greater intensity of want when you're starting from a much lower level to progress up the levels. So, for example, wanting your first washing machine is exciting, whereas in the Western country, we used to take it for granted. So that intensity drives business and becomes a catalyst for, multiplier of businesses.
Yeah. And what about the IT sector? I know that we often think about India as a major kind of IT hub. How did that get started?
I think the background to that is the fact that India is a Commonwealth country to start with.
Yeah.
And the population is an English-speaking population.
Yes.
There's a lot of tendency to education, and IT being one of the prominent areas where Indians would like to go and start their career. All this put in perspective, and the very fact that Indian cost of labor was relatively cheaper around the globe, it started becoming attractive for outsourcing units to be set up. In a recent survey, I was told that India stood out to be the #1 outsourcing destination for most of the Western countries in the world, and that's where we are.
Yeah, yeah. Anything to add to that, Suren?
Well, look, I think it's interesting to look at, I do a lot of business in other Asian countries as well, like China, like Singapore, Malaysia, etc. You have to look at what distinguishes India from those countries. And given what Mehul said in regards to the fact that it's a Commonwealth country, English background, common laws that are very similar, it's easier to do business in India. In fact, to give you an example, like in doing business in China, you have to first gain rapport with people, which means, getting used to having nice big dinners and some nice drinks afterwards. Whereas in India, you just start the conversation of cricket. And all of a sudden, everyone's, interested, everyone understands it, and you build rapport much quicker. And from that basis, it's much easier to get on with people to look at how you do business more effectively.
Yeah, I suppose the fact that everyone speaks English is a big advantage for Western countries. Now, what are some of the characteristics of India as opposed to other Asian countries in terms of the industries that might be relevant?
Yeah, look, I think, India now is sort of growing. And so, as the consumer becomes more wanting of opportunity, it allows you to look at a whole range of businesses. For example, the car industry is a good example. India used to try and, have its own means of transport, and it's quite hilarious, actually, if you look at some of the means of transport there. But now, for the first time, you go to India and you see BMWs, you see Rolls Royces, you see some of these fancy cars around. So the car industry is just growing and spreading and getting more diversified. And it's similar to many other industries. Another example I'll give you is a friend that I knew took a franchise opportunity called Cookie Man to India. And, within a very short space of time, I've seen the Cookie Man machines in all these major shopping centers. So, if you've got a good idea, if you've got something unique, there's a need for diverse range of products and opportunities in India.
Yeah, no, we'll come back to that. And what about the middle class? Because that seems to me, and the young segment in particular, seems to me a reason that India is going to be a country of the future with these young, emerging middle class consumers. How quickly is that developing, and where do they generally find themselves?
The middle class is the key sector right now where all the businesses are targeting to as the potential consumers. And I'm just adding on to what Suren said, that the middle class is where the wants are as well. So that's where they like their washing machines, their color televisions, their fancy cars, and that's where the demand is being generated. Yeah. And all businesses, whether they're small businesses or large businesses, see that as a potential.
I guess one thing to note is, the cultural side of things. Indian parents put all the effort and focus on their children. And so they'll do whatever it takes, not just to educate their children, but to take care of them and set them up for their future, which means that a lot of the wealth transfer is focused on the children, not just on pure consumption. So one needs to focus on the young generation of opportunities that you could deliver to those kids of the future.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I'd like to add there that you asked a question about the middle class. Quite a few years ago, education was not across India. So there was a lot of part of the rural sectors of India where education wasn't really prevalent. But since last, I would say, a decade or so, we are getting very high in terms of the percentage of literacy. And as literacy improves, the income for families also improve. So the number of families that now move on from the lower middle class to maybe an upper middle class is also growing at a very rapid rate.
Yes.
In fact, there's an interesting statistic that in Kerala region, I think they're saying it's almost 100% literacy rate.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow. Gosh. So for somebody coming to India for the first time, they've never been to India before, what could they expect? Like what kind of shock or what kind of experience should they perhaps start preparing for before they even go to India?
Look, I've been to India, several times, and it's changed each time. But, you hear of stories, and you come into, first time land at the airport, and, you'll see beggars around, you'll see, animals around, you'll see all these sort of things. But it's rapidly changed. Now you see more fancy cars around, but you'll still get some quirks. I mean, you've got to expect when you get to India, there'll be some quirky things, and you need to have the right people to guide you there in terms of entering into the country, who you know, what taxis you take. Those things are important when you come in to India for the first time.
And not to mention the traffic.
Yeah, everyone talks about the traffic. I mean, and obviously, I've been to India many times, and you set out with a program of meetings in mind, 3 or 4 in a day, which you'd normally expect in most cities, and you find you can spend an hour or two waiting.
I should share this with you because I was recently in India to do some business, and I planned to go into the city in Delhi. Luckily, I stayed a day at the airport, but just to get from the airline, from the airport to the airport hotel was a interesting experience in itself. I mean, cars, just fight for an inch to get there. And after I got into the airport hotel, I said, look, I'm doing all my business in the airport hotel, where a lot of the business gets done. Yeah. It's much easier for people to come to you in India than to you to travel to see them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, just a last point about India and why India. One of the things, I'm a cricket fan, like I know Suren is, and I'm sure you are as well. And one of the things I've noticed is that when I was young, Indian cricketers were fairly humble, gentlemanly types who didn't sort of ever get very angry and certainly didn't sledge anyone and didn't get into trouble. These days, Indian cricketers have become very confident, very nationalistic, and are often in the face of Western cricketers, Australians, British, others. Is that something you notice when you go to India? There's more nationalism. There's a lot of new hope around the new president. Are you seeing that kind of change?
I think there's a general trend as the wealth has grown in the country. Unfortunately, so has some of the egos, to the point where it's reached arrogance to some extent. And so you'll find that there's a bit more confidence, and with that confidence there's a bit more ego, and so people express themselves a lot more strongly, especially in terms of nationalistic sentiment.
Yeah. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. Yes, given the fact that there has been a lot of changes in the country in terms of the Prime Minister, and the positive changes in the country, and the confidence in the businesses, and the fact that the people have started earning a lot more incomes, clearly that change is only but natural to happen.
Yes.
And there is definitely...
To continue enjoying this presentation, download BRiN, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit BRiN.ai or search the App Store today.